What is up, YouTube? Today we are driving a 2005 Mercedes-Benz S500. This is the W220 chassis. I've made a couple videos on this chassis before, but I figured I'd cover today some reliability aspects, and we're just going to take this thing for a drive, and I'm going to show you how great of a car this actually is. This is the cheapest, best luxury car you can buy for the money. This is loaded with air suspension, loaded with a beautiful full leather interior, a lot of comfort features, a lot of legroom in the back. It's a long wheelbase car. It's just loaded with comfort. Let me show you guys the engine. This is the S500, so this one has the beautiful, reliable M113 5-liter V8 motor. Makes around 300 horsepower, somewhere around there, more or less. But these are extremely bulletproof engines. Not a whole lot goes wrong. I'm also a huge fan of the M113K, the supercharged version of this motor. But this is like a small block Chevy of the Mercedes world. This is just an unkillable engine. It has air suspension. Some of the things that do like to go wrong on these with age, these idlers, tensioners, they're made out of plastic. The water pumps, the bearing gets bad in them, or the alternator goes bad every once and then. The crank pulley sometimes starts to wobble. Small little things, valve cover gaskets. Sometimes these coolant expansion tanks like to crack. This little plastic nipple breaks off, and then you get a small coolant leak. But overall, these are extremely reliable engines, and they last a very long time. Let me show you guys the interior. Oh, also you have soft closed doors. Okay, so we're inside of the S500. Let's start this thing up. You got convenience features like the steering wheel goes up for you, up and down, and moves out of the way so you can get in and out nicely. You can also set it so the seat moves back. It just gives you a whole lot of room to enter and exit. This particular car is a high mileage car, 179,000. I'm going to tell you what kind of comes along with this mileage and what you're going to have to do to maintain this car. You're definitely going to need to do engine mounts and transmission mount. In this car, the engine mounts literally were split into two pieces. Every time you would floor it, the engine would jump, so I had to change those. Bad engine mounts will mess up your AC line, will puncture will make a hole basically in it, because the engine's going to be tugging on it. So that's going to go bad, and sometimes your exhaust hanger welds can break off because of the bad engine mount. So some small little things. The air suspension, that requires some maintenance. The airbags like to get cracks after a long period of time, and then you have slow leaks. Then there's also a valve block, and that valve block starts to leak internally, and that valve block is where every single strut from around the car connects to in order to maintain all the pressure. And once that starts leaking internally, your car might start dropping over, I don't know, overnight or over a few days. So air suspension, these motors are solid. 722.6 transmission. In this one we have the 7-speed, which is very good on gas, very good on the highway. It's a little slow at shifting, but it's a very solid transmission overall. You got a lot of cool features like cooled seats, heated seats. It's loaded with a lot of different features. These are your climate controls. This one has an aftermarket stereo with Bluetooth and all that. These stereo systems are fiber optic, the original ones. They do sound great. They're both speakers stock, but they do like to break every now and then. If you have an interruption in the fiber optic system, the system just shuts off, and then it'll start draining your battery, and you're gonna have a whole lot of different weird problems and quirks. You got automatic headlights, you got folding mirrors. You could set it so when you lock the car, these fold in and out. You got a sunroof up here. You got some rear makeup mirrors. You got also comfort and standard. So comfort starts off in second gear and it shifts a little slower. And standard starts off in first gear, shifts a little faster. You basically, the car's a lot more responsive when you put it into standard. These are your lock controls, traction. You can actually drop these headrests with this button right here. This is for towing. You got different air suspension sport modes for the dampening. So you got Sports 1, Sports 2. And these actually make a huge difference. The way this car corners after you punch these is totally different. And you also can raise it. We also have a rear privacy shade. Some of them even get optioned with the side window ones for the rear windows with the privacy shade, but this car does not have that. Let's take this car for a drive, and yeah, let's take this car for a drive. This is where this really shines. This is one of the best, cheapest daily drivers that you can buy, that gives you a lot of comfort. It's decently reliable. These are super easy to work on. The parts are super cheap for these cars. You can find a lot of used parts, a lot of part out cars, new parts. Prices are cheap for those. The drivetrain is extremely reliable in these. The transmission and suspension, or the transmission and the engines don't really go bad. It's just mainly leaks and accessories and things like that that do go bad. With the transmission, that there's a little 13-pin plug that connects the computer harness. That, like, there's like a seal on it, and that likes to leak transmission fluid up into the harness, up into the transmission computer. So that's something to look out for in these. And also the transmission gaskets like to leak. Overall, you got double pane windows, so you got a very smooth, refined ride. It's very quiet in here. Very comfortable leather seats with a lot of adjustments. You can adjust the lumbar, you can adjust the tightness of the how much the seat hugs you right here with these controls right here. There's even a pulse massage function. You got cruise control. And this thing, for a 5-liter V8, gets going relatively quick. I recently changed all 16 spark plugs, engine mounts. I did brake rotors, brakes, so I know that this thing's pretty solid. These are very smooth cars. You can buy these for $3 grand. You can buy these for $5 grand. A very nice ones closer to 10 grand. This is a great long distance, long trip car. On the highway, this basically floats. You don't feel tired and drained after you get out of this car. That's one of the beauties of this car right here. You got your digital speed right there, your temperature. You got a clock right there. This thing absorbs the bumps really nicely. For a 5.0 V8, this thing I'd say gets going very quickly, and it's very smooth power too. You essentially don't feel that there's an engine doing all the work for you. They designed this car in a way where it's just pure smoothness, pure silkiness. I'm sure the V12 is even smoother, You can get the S600, but that comes with a whole lot more headaches. You get the ABC suspension, which is 10 times harder to work on than the air suspension. And then there's a whole lot more issues that comes, you know, with the S600s, but that's a different category of car. They're also cool cars. Some people do like to put the spring conversion. In my opinion, that ruins this car. It's like taking a Rolex watch and putting a G-Shock movement in there. It just kind of kills that originality of it. It kind of kills the smoothness that these cars come with. And nowadays, since these cars are a little bit older, about 20 years old, replacing these suspension components is really not that bad. It's not that costly. There's a lot of aftermarket parts that you can buy for the suspension on eBay. You could replace this whole suspension relatively cheap. So that's something I wouldn't really worry too much about. But it is a maintenance item that does go bad on all of these. The suspension mainly. That's what mainly kills these cars, typically the suspension. On this one we have no messages. I fixed everything. No warnings, no nothing like that. You got your oil measuring, you got digital oil, service, your miles per gallon, your range. This might not be the best car on gas. It's not the worst car on gas, but it's not the best car on gas. It's a big old 5.0 V8. Does eat quite a bit of gas. You're buying this for comfort though. You're not buying this for gas. If you're buying this for cutting gas costs, you buy a Prius. This is not why you buy this car. S-Class is just the pinnacle of luxury. I mean, it's one of the smoothest cars money could buy for you. And with these being about 20 years old, they're becoming very accessible to a lot of people. The only thing with owning one of these, you need to be able to work on the car yourself, because maintenance costs of these cars can cost you more at a shop than what it costs to actually buy the car. So if you're not very mechanically inclined, I would certainly not recommend this car. Another issue that these like to have, the drains for the water get clogged up with leaves. There's a drain right there in the front, or the taillight seals like to start leaking, and then water starts getting into the computers, the SAM modules. And then once that happens, you're gonna have a plethora of weird and random issues, and usually they're caused by water intrusion through either the drains or the bad taillight seals, and that sometimes causes those computers to get fried, and then, you know, some things are not going to work, or the car is not going to start. So it's a very common thing that happens with these. I've actually bought a lot of these with flooded computers because of water intrusion. It's actually simple and cheap to fix, but it does happen. You know, that's just one of the things of these cars. They're older now. Some people forget to clean the drains, and water gets in there. And some of the rear computer is actually mounted on the floor, so that's one of the first ones that always goes. So that's that. There's a PSC pump, a pneumatic pump for the soft closed doors and the locks. The locks are actually powered by that pump. That's why they're so silent. There's no mechanicals involved. It's just air controlled. So are the soft closed doors, and so is the trunk release. And that pump likes to burn out, usually because of a leak in one of the air lines. And that leak usually causes that pump to continue running until the motor in that pump burns, and then you lose your locks, you lose your soft closed doors, you lose your trunk popping. So that's something to consider. I used to actually part out these cars. I would buy them really cheap, and I would strip them for parts and sell all the parts on eBay, Facebook, OfferUp. And that was one of the first things people always asked for, the PSC pump. So I know that's a very common part that goes bad with these. You got your mirror controls, you got memory seats, you got your trunk popper, your window switches. There's supposed to be a cup holder here that pops out, but this cup holder is usually always broken in these cars. I rarely seen one ever that worked well. It's a very brittle cup holder made out of plastic, and they tend to break, but you can get those really cheap on eBay. This is just a great smooth machine, and for the price it costs, you can't go wrong with this car. This is like, I like to call these throwaway Benzes, because if something happens to it, it's cheap enough to justify buying another one. And you don't really care that it gets a door ding when you're, you know, when you're daily driving this. You don't care if it gets a little beat up, because it's cheap. It's cheap to obtain, it's cheap to buy. That's why it's a perfect daily driver. You're not too concerned with taking it anywhere. You buy a new one, then you're concerned with, you know, getting a door ding or parking it somewhere, or it's just, you become a lot more cautious. But this thing, you don't have to be as cautious. Replacement parts are cheap. There are plenty available. There's a lot of these cars at junkyards. There's a lot of these cars at pick and pulls. Basically, a lot of part out places have these, because sometimes it's not worth fixing one of these. If there's too many things wrong, just the cost and time outweighs just the worthness factor of it. So parts are very easily available. These interiors hold up pretty well for $179,000. You know, there's one little rip in this seat, but that's about it. This isn't even worn out. The quality of leathers in here is actually pretty nice. Very nice wood. Everything's nicely finished. You actually have remote openers for your garage that you can program. So despite what the internet tells you about the 220, these are fantastic cars. As long as you're mechanically inclined, you know how to work on cars yourself, you cannot go wrong with buying one of these, especially if it has the air suspension instead of the ABC. It's just a great buy. But these cars do require a decent amount of maintenance. Any luxury car requires a decent amount of maintenance. The suspension requires a decent amount of maintenance, the ball joints, the tie rods. There's a lot of different control arms. The Germans like to design these suspensions with a million different control arms. Just from age and mileage, it's a very heavy boat. Those ball joints do like to get worn out, and then you're gonna have some play in the wheel. You'll have a little bit of clunking here and there. The sway bar links like to go bad. But besides the regular wear and tear items that just wear with age, the engine and the transmission, the most important things, are very solid. You could probably replace the suspension for under $1,000 in this car. On eBay, I think you could get 4 struts for like $400. Valve blocks like $50. Even a new compressor is only like about $100. So it's relatively cheap to replace that suspension. If you want to go with OEM parts or R-Not, it's going to be a little bit more. I had a pretty good experience with the aftermarket shocks, with the aftermarket compressor, the aftermarket valve block. They do still hold up. I'm not sure long term how it is, but I know that they're made relatively similar to the original stuff, just at a fraction of the cost. There are certain things I would never buy aftermarket, like sensors. Certain things don't fit well that are aftermarket. Very smooth, very, very smooth. Some of these are even optioned with the Distronic cruise control, where it senses the car in front of you. You can usually tell that by if the grille has this little plastic shield in it. That tells you right away that it's a Distronic car. This particular car has the AMG package, which gives it a nicer appearance from the outside, gives it nicer bumpers, side skirts. The bumpers, I feel like, are a little more aggressive. They make this car look a little more mean. It looks exactly like the AMGs. It's the same body kit that the AMGs got, like the S500 and the S600. Personally, I like to buy these 220s with the AMG Sport package because it kind of gives them a more modern appearance. And you get AMG wheels also. I'm a fan of the facelift models, the 2003 and up. They're just a little more refined. They're a little nicer on the inside. They get like nicer seats. They get nicer headlights. They get a couple improvements over the older ones, the pre-facelift. They just feel a little bit more modern, the facelift models. Yeah, but I wouldn't hesitate buying S500 in this body style, as long as you're mechanically inclined. And these are pretty easy to work on. Even if you have never really worked on a car, it's a very simple and easy car to work on. It's not overcomplicated. As soon as you start getting into the ABC model cars, that's where things get really complicated. I have a CL55 I just got running, and just getting the suspension in place was a job in itself. I rebuilt the whole engine. I bought it with a blown engine. I rebuilt the engine. I put an engine in. I got it running. The ABC is just a whole other level of work than the air suspension. There's a fluid involved. There's high pressure. There's a lot of lines that go in and out. It's a whole lot of extra work to to get that fixed and running. Alrighty guys, that about concludes this test drive here. I hope you guys enjoyed this. These are fantastic daily drivers. This is one of the most luxurious, cheapest cars that you can buy today. And as long as you know how to, you have a little bit of mechanical knowledge, I would highly recommend this. This is just, it's fantastic. It's very comfortable, it's silky smooth, it's very quiet. You got great speakers, great sound system. Just everything you'd want out of a daily driver, and a low price tag. You can get these really cheap nowadays. So thank you guys for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed this, and next video is going to be my CL55. If you guys enjoyed this, hit the like button, subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.